Sal Cooper, the illegitimate son of the Cooper family, yearns for acceptance and decides to become a shadow, a mercenary who carries out the Cooper family's unethical tasks. As he matures, Sal becomes an accomplished swordsman, surpassing the family's expectations. Despite his achievements, he receives not praise but a death sentence. Executed, Sal unexpectedly awakens in the body of a child, his memories intact. Fueled by a desire for revenge, he vows to make the Coopers pay for betraying him. In a silent hall, Sal Cooper kneels on the floor with his sword in hand. His master stands before him, stating that Saul, the family's shadow, has betrayed them for colluding with the enemy, pronouncing a sentence of execution in the name of the new family head. The master's words ignite a fiery rage within Saul, who knows his innocence all too well. Suddenly, he swings his sword, calling all present as deceitful beasts fit only for hell. Unfortunately, his attack ends shortly, when a sword pierces through his chest. Sal had dedicated his whole life to the family, but became a sacrificial lamb instead. As the rest of the guards repeatedly stab him in the back, Sal struggles to accept the abrupt end to his life, and so he makes a vow to himself, declaring that if there is a next life, he will rip everyone into shreds. Then, with his last remaining strength, Sal charges toward his master, ready to avenge himself at all costs. Suddenly, he wakes up, reincarnated as a little child. Sal is quick to get up on his feet, cautious of his surroundings. He asks himself if he's in hell, but the place seems so familiar, like he's been there before. Just then, someone pours water over him, and the culprit is none other than a fat troll of a woman, telling him to clean himself, because someone will be taking him somewhere later. Furious, Sal stares at her with a sharp look, only to be met by a super slap. The woman calls him a little brat, who hasn't grown all his hair, which greatly confuses Saul. Just then, he looks at his reflection in the water, and sees that he is indeed a little brat, quite literally. He chuckles to himself, realizing that he was reincarnated, back to his 3-year-old body. If that's not a demon child, I don't know what is. In Sal's previous life, he was a shadow for the Cooper family. Together with the other shadows, he endured rigorous and cruel training since he was young. Like a shadow, these men did all the family's dirty work, including murder, arson, espionage, and more. As a reward, the family presented them with richness and glory, leading the shadows to endure all the hardships voluntarily. Sal also happened to be an illegitimate son of the family, so he faced a lot of bullying growing up. However, he was determined to change his fate. He was talentless. At least he's self-aware, so he trained to death to make up for it. He was always neglected, so he volunteered to fight for the Cooper family. With this, he beheaded enemies and destroyed cities to fulfill his orders. After countless slaughters, he finally achieved victory for the family. Sal thought he would be greeted with rewards for his hard work, but he was framed instead. His master accused him of conspiring with the enemy, which in turn led to his execution. This is when Sal realizes the harsh truth behind the existence of shadows. His master revealed to him that from the day he became a shadow oath had been cast on him. The strength Sal obtained from his growth will all be transferred to his master, while every injury that the master will receive will be sent to Sal. As for the money and glory, it was all a lie. A simple bait to lure pathetic bugs like Saul. Darn, that's harsh. Saul tried to swing his final strike, and although he was able to slash his master's shoulder, he was suddenly engulfed by flames. Saul understood that this was blood magic, a reversal shadow oath. With that, Allan, his master, has stolen all his hard-earned power. And so that's Sal's backstory. Now, here he is, reincarnated as a little child with the consciousness of a grown man. Having been blessed with a second chance, Sal's swears never to repeat the same mistakes. However, his little pep talk gets disturbed when his stomach suddenly starts growling. Just then, he lays his eyes on an innocent rat. You already know where this is going. In Sal's past life, he used to eat rats because it's better than human meat, so it's not that big of a deal. So he prepares to catch the little rodent, ready to gobble it up raw. However, 2 men suddenly enter the area, telling Sal to come with them, because Allan wants to see him. As the men drag him away, he remembers that when he was chosen to become a shadow in his past life, all his memories disappeared after his initiation. This must have been the time when he was cursed with the blood magic. Realizing this, Sal bites one of the men's hands. This causes a ruckus, leading the men to attempt to subdue him with a punch. However, Saul, with his ninja moves, dodges the attack and reaches for the man's sword. He then swings the sword, slicing off the man's arm. The other man is terrified of Sal, seeing that he's a child who can wield a sword. Sal then looks at the man with a menacing smile, ready to take revenge. The Shadow Oath is an ancient form of blood magic where the caster, who controls the oath, sacrifices a small amount of blood to make the target become their shadow. This shadow is unable to harm the Oathmaster and must endure any injuries that the Oathmaster would otherwise suffer. Additionally, all of the shadow's growth and abilities are transferred to the Oathmaster. Due to the cruel nature of this magic, the Empire issued an order 100 years ago to destroy all grimoires containing records of shadow oaths to prevent its use. Meanwhile, despite his attempts to escape, Sal is still summoned by the 8-year-old Allan. The man responsible for bringing in Sal is slapped by Allan, who calls him an idiot for letting a wild dog bully him. At this time, Allan is still the successor of the Cooper family. Just then, Allan walks towards Sal, furious that he dared to touch one of his people. With a menacing smile, Allan commands his guards to throw Sal in the dungeon. However, before this could happen, Hera Cooper, Allan's mother and the matriarch of the Cooper family, walks into the vicinity. She reasons that no one looked after Saul since he was young, so it's normal for him to act a little crazy. She also reminds Allan that this isn't the time to punish him, as they should be focusing on the oath-taking ceremony. Hera then whispers to Allan not to forget their goal for the day, sending immediate shivers down the young man's spine. Allan then gazes at Saul, confused as to why his mother chose this lowly bastard child to become his shadow. He then vows to himself that he will beat up Saul when he gets the chance. Just then, Allan shifts his demeanor, and she smiles at his mother while acting obediently. Glad to see his polite response, Hera reassures her son that she will take care of everything to not disturb Allan, their future family head. As she leaves, she informs the guard to clear the place except for Allan. She also tasks the other guards to cast the soundproofing spell to not disturb her son. After this, the ceremony begins. Allan raises his cup for an oath, claiming that from this time forward, every one of the kids in the room will become a member of the Shadow Army. The other kids then recite that they will dedicate their entire lives to the family, as everything was granted by them. After reciting the oath, Saul, together with the other kids, consume the substance in their cups. Just then, they all fall unconscious. Allan can only laugh at these naive idiots, because they can't even differentiate between drugged water and holy water. With everyone unconscious, Allan injures his palm, causing blood to spur out. With this, he begins his blood magic, causing all the kids to provide their strength to him, while all the harm he sustains becomes theirs to bear. Just then, Allan feels the power entering his body. He didn't expect the ritual to be so simple, and he might even believe he's a genius. Proud of his achievement, Allan quickly calls out to his mother. However, he suddenly falls to the ground, unable to walk. He can't move his legs, and he wonders if this is the oath's side effect. Panicking, Allan calls out to his mother, like the mama's boy that he is. Just then, someone calls him a coward for always hiding behind his mother's back. The person says it's a shame that Hera can't hear him because of the soundproof spell. No matter how loud he cries, no one will be able to hear him. To Allan's horror, the person talking is none other than Saul, who is standing right behind him with a sword in hand, his eyes glowing red. Jesus, this kid is scary. Allan is horrified to see him awake, and he's confused about how he found out about the oath. However, Saul breaks it to him that he knows a lot of things. With a devilish grin, Saul taunts Allan with the thought of reversing the Shadow Oath. Suddenly, Saul wields his sword and drives it to the floor. Upon impact, the sword glows and summons massive flares of fire. Allan screams in agony, wailing that his heart is hurting. Anxiously, he asks Sal what he intends to do. Sal responds that in his previous life, he paid with his life to reclaim everything that belonged to him. Therefore, in this life, he will return the favor. He then suddenly aims the sword at Allan, causing his scream to pierce through the soundproof spell. Hera, informed by this alarming news, begins to panic. As night falls, Allan lies silently on his bed with his mother by his side. Hera's assistant informs her that Allan's body is fine. He just faints from overusing his magic power. He also explains that the soundproof spell broke because of a distracted servant during casting, but that person has already been executed. Unfazed, Hera orders the corpse to be fed to the dogs. Allan definitely learned from the OG here. Hera then gazes at her son, while her assistant mentions Allan's unsettled state, explaining that the master is too young for the Shadow Oath, inevitably placing a burden on the heart. Meanwhile, Allan remains silent, sensing that something big happened earlier but despite his efforts, he can't recall it. Hera suddenly pats his head, startling him. Hera reassures Allan, emphasizing that the strong prey upon the weak in this world. However, she doesn't get to continue speaking when Allan suddenly flicks her hand away, insisting that as the future head of the Cooper family, those wretched shadows should be born to sacrifice their lives for him. Hera chuckles, pleased to see her son's demonic energy again. They embrace, and Hera promises to reward him. These two are weird. Unbeknownst to them, Sal listens to their conversation outside the window. He crosses his arms, smiling as he observes the deep bond between mother and son. Well, they better enjoy their time together because from this day forth, Allan Cooper has become his shadow. In his past life, when Sal battled for the family, he discovered a blood magic index that contained records on Shadow Oath. Excitedly, he presented it to the family, not realizing he had already been marked as their sacrificial pawn. Fortunately, Sal had looked through the contents of the book and combined this knowledge with his past experience of reclaiming his power. Now, he knew that with a small amount of blood, he could reverse the Shadow Oath and swap places with Allan. However, his 3-year-old body is still too weak to fight anyone, leading Sal to be motivated to get stronger. His first step to becoming stronger is to head to the Flaming Cliff, the Cooper family's testing grounds created to select strong shadows, willing to sacrifice themselves for the family. The scenario is like Prometheus' story, stealing fire for humanity and enduring the relentless attacks of an eagle. Similarly, the Cooper family threw children, 10 years old and younger, into the Flaming Cliff, and they were ordered to trek through thorns and endure a griffin gouging their flesh. Damn, these Cooper dudes need a trip to the psych ward. Even with their final breaths, these kids were not allowed to give up until the first shadow scaled the peak. This shadow will obtain the blessings of the griffin and receive a body that would never be injured, no matter how much it was attacked or pecked. Finally, the day has come for Sal and the other kids to test their luck on the Flaming Cliff. Innes Walker, a Shadows training officer, informs the kids that they only have 3 days to reach the peak. Regardless of what methods they use, they only have one objective for the test, and that is to reach the peak alive. He also adds that deserters will be sentenced to death after the test. Not much of a choice now, is it? Suddenly, Innes blows the whistle, and the kids scramble their way to the cliff. However, Innes notices something odd about Saul, who seems to act very chill compared to the others. Innes is puzzled as to why Saul remains so composed while everyone else is acting like headless chickens. While the other kids head in the same direction, Saul seems to have his own unique approach. And there's a subordinate that informs him that Saul is part of the Cooper family, the illegitimate son, who angered Allan Cooper the day before. Suddenly, Sal begins climbing the cliff. Innes and his subordinate can't help but laugh at his unconventional method, thinking Sal is stupid for not taking the slope and instead scaling the cliff barehanded. They are sure that Saul will likely fall, without even reaching the halfway mark. Innes' subordinate suddenly suggests they prepare to collect Sal's corpse, since they expect him to die any moment now. However, Innes disagrees, saying there is no need for it. Innes claims that he has an interesting idea, and now is the perfect time for their special guest to show up. Suddenly, a giant griffin emerges out of the sky, sending the kids into a frenzy. By the time Sal gets to the peak, the other kids have already been brutally killed by the giant griffin. Meanwhile, Innes grabs his bow and arrow, claiming that he will eliminate Sal for injuring the young master. Wanting to get some points for being a good boy, Innes fires his arrow towards the griffin, hitting some of its feathers. Coincidentally, the griffin lays its eyes on Saul, thinking that he's the one who attacked him. Saul really has a knack for getting framed, huh? The griffin calls him a foolish human that should die, and it swiftly charges towards him. Yes, it talks. However, Saul suddenly springs from the ground, avoiding the griffin's attack. If there's anything that he learned from his previous life, is that the best way to scale to the peak and obtain the griffin's blessing is to tame it. With this, Sal jumps onto the griffin's back, ready to pierce the giant bird with his sword. The griffin's agonized cry pierces the air as Sal's blade strikes its head. Sal knows that griffins are stubborn because of their intelligence, so he has to subdue it completely, or it will never yield to him. Focusing all of his energy, he unleashes his signature move, the Shadow Blade slashing third form. However, the griffin is cunning, dodging Sal's attack with a swift maneuver. In retaliation, it creates a swirling orb of wind, launching it directly at Sal. In an instant, Sal is ripped from the griffin's back, sending him hurtling through the air. If it wasn't for his godly reflexes, he would fall into his death. Thankfully, Sal manages to hold on to the rocky cliffside just before he meets his doom. Sal acknowledges his carelessness, realizing he's now just a 3-year-old child, far from the seasoned 30-year-old warrior he once was. Mastering sword techniques in his previous life is not that beneficial now, because his current physique and strength are insufficient against Griffin. However, Sal refuses to surrender in the face of adversity. With desperation fueling his every move, Sal gets a big brain moment, reaching the nearby cave. Just then, the Griffin unleashes another wind orb, hurtling it towards Sal. However, he dodges and escapes. Although Sal managed to evade the Griffin, the force of its attack still leaves him awestruck. Fortunately, Sal is well aware of the Griffin's increasing power, which elevates from level 1 to 10 with each wind orb unleashed. He knows that by the time the 10th wind orb is released, even 100 of him wouldn't stand a chance. Suddenly, a revelation strikes him. He stops in his tracks, opting instead to face the Griffin head-on and uses wind power to propel himself towards the cave. With no means to dodge the impending attack, he braces himself. As the Griffin's wind orb strikes, Sal withstands the force, using its momentum to launch himself toward the cave. Despite the impact, he manages to reach his destination. Inside the cave, he activates his Shadow Oath, reducing his energy consumption while simultaneously absorbing Allan's strength. Meanwhile, Allan senses the power shift, and he drops his cup of tea and collapses onto the floor. Poor guy just became a power bank, and he doesn't even know it. Saul successfully enters the cave, but the Griffin chases him. However, the Griffin's aggression suddenly stops as Sal reveals a surprising twist. In his arms, he cradles the Griffin's crying baby, holding his sword at the ready. With a smirk, Sal teases the Griffin, revealing a little-known secret. The powerful beast's offspring is born with broken wings, unable to fly. However, Sal assures the Griffin that he has no ill intent toward the baby. Instead, he offers an interesting proposition. He can mend the baby's broken wings and grant it the ability to fly. The Griffin, torn between skepticism and hope, demands to know what Sal desires in return. As Sal and the Griffin discuss the deal within the cave, Enos and his subordinate notice the unsettling silence. Assuming that Sal has been eaten, the two decide to head home and report the news to Allan, eager to receive favors. However, Sal suddenly emerges from the cave riding the Griffin. He claims that he will send the men off, but they might have to wait for Allan in hell. Before the men could react, the Griffin mauls them to death, eating them raw. Having fulfilled his end of the bargain, the Griffin turns to Sal, reminding him of their pact. With a nod of acknowledgement, Sal directs the Griffin to guide him to this secret realm, nestled within the northernmost reaches of the mountain range. Later on, the two arrive at the Land of Stone, where they find themselves facing a giant gate. The Griffin reminds him to honor their agreement, which is for Saul to take the sword of Perseus. After that, Sal will help in obtaining Medusa's blood, which has the power to cure everything. Sal reassures the Griffin that it's no problem, but he keeps quiet about his true intentions. His goal isn't the Holy Sword or to help the Griffin, but it's to destroy the place, using the Griffin as his pawn. I thought the Griffin was gonna be his badass sidekick. Just then, the Griffin pushes the gates open, revealing 3 figures, and a statue of a woman with the body of a snake. Out of nowhere, the statues start moving, attacking Sal and the Griffin. The Griffin effortlessly destroyed the statues, but unfortunately, the broken fragments reassembled slowly into one. Sal fell to the ground upon witnessing this and muttered the names of the statues, Dino, Ennio, and Pemfredo. He explained that these 3 statues, like the Grey sisters in mythology, lacked the 5 organs and shared a single eye and tooth. He adds that the 3 statues have the ability to control seawater because they are the daughters of sea deities, including Medusa. Just then, the Grey sisters finalize their transformation, which is a giant water monster capable of controlling the tides against Sal and the Griffin. Sal urges the Griffin to run, but the Griffin tells him that there's no point in escaping and that they should find a way to obtain the sword. Sal worriedly tells the Griffin that he's looking for it. However, the Griffin is growing anxious, reminding Sal that if the place collapses, they will all die. Sal suddenly reveals he's reading the runes on the wall, hoping one of them will lead him to the sword. Someone give this guy his Oscar already. Sal secretly smiles at his evil plan. If the realm finally collapses, he will escape from a secret tunnel that he discovered in his previous life. However, Sal realizes that the tsunami wave isn't enough to destroy the whole place, so he thinks of something that might add to the chaos. Just then, he spots a red eye buried in the realm's ceiling and instructs the griffin to retrieve it, claiming the runes suggest the sisters will stop attacking if the eye is removed. As expected, this griffin has a bird brain, literally and figuratively, and it complies right away. True enough, the sister's giant form dissolves after the eye is removed, as the giant form gets reduced to nothing but water. Sal explains that the runes suggest that Perseus discovered the location of Medusa only after stealing the eye of the Grey sisters, and this is their weakness. Just then, the griffin remembers the sword and asks Sal about it. The griffin also hastily asks about the blood that can heal its baby, and if the runes say anything about where it can be found. Suddenly, Sal points to his left, where the sword is stuck in the ground, engulfed in fire. Sal explains that Perseus used that very sword to behead Medusa, spilling both red and green blood. The red blood can poison all living souls, while the green blood can heal all ailments. However, those are just legends, and this realm holds a different secret. The appearance of Perseus' sword can only mean one thing: Medusa is coming to town. Just then, the notorious Medusa emerges in all her glory, her body enveloped in blue flames. Sal immediately makes a run for it, hoping the griffin will become her target. He knows that once the Medusa statue is activated, it won't stop unless beheaded by Perseus' sword. However, just before Sal reaches the secret tunnel, Medusa's tail attacks him. He narrowly dodges it, puzzled by her pursuit. He looks for the griffin and sees it cowardly hiding behind a rock, having shrunk itself. The griffin, clearly afraid, doesn't want to face Medusa and risk its life. Suddenly, one of Medusa's snakes chases Sal, but he dodges it again. Fortunately, Sal passed this secret realm once in his previous life, so he's not entirely out of options. He quickly runs towards the shields from the Knights of the Round Table, hoping that he can use the reflection of the shield to lower the risk of looking directly into Medusa's eyes and turning into stone. At the same time, the shield can also protect him from Medusa's gaze attack. Just then, Medusa releases a strong surge of blue flames, her deadly attack that Sal is preparing for. He protects himself from direct contact, but the impact still injures him, causing him to cough out blood. As Sal lies on the ground, he realizes that the shield is not enough to protect him. To make matters worse, the secret exit has been destroyed. At this point, death is just around the corner for Sal. With his level of talent, he surely can't wield the sword of Perseus. However, he'll never know if he doesn't try, so he runs towards it with all his might. To his surprise, he's able to lift the sword with one arm, greatly shocking himself. Just then, one of Medusa's snakes constricts him, but he remains lost in his thoughts. As Medusa holds Sal close to her face, the young man can't help but think that his rank is too low for him to hold the sword, and yet he still has it in his hands. He recalls Allan telling him that a mere D-rank talent is unfit to wield or even touch the sword. He also remembers being tied to a cross, while Allan told his mother that Saul might remember his talents being stripped away. Hera replied that amnesia magic would do the trick. Then, Allan chuckled, claiming Saul's swordsmanship talent as his own. So he was never talentless to begin with. His memories were just manipulated. This revelation fills Sal with fury, causing him to wield the sword and cut off Medusa's snakes. Observing from afar, the griffin can barely process how Sal breaks free so easily. Suddenly, Sal decapitates Medusa with ease, calling her a monster. As Sal laughs like little Hitler, the griffin seizes the opportunity to scurry away. However, just as it's about to escape, it gets startled by Sal's commanding voice, ordering it to come back. Reluctantly, the griffin turns around, addressing Sal as its lord. Sensing the griffin's fear, despite it being an S-rank monster, Sal takes advantage of the situation. Just then, Sal asks the griffin if his head is made of metal, a question that leaves the creature confused. After explaining his plan, Sal directed the griffin to fly into the tunnel and start destroying it. Forced to crash into the walls, the griffin got a lump on its head, with Sal riding on its back. The griffin realized that Sal had been using it to destroy the secret realm from the start. Knowing that Sal could heal his offspring, the griffin decides to let the situation pass and continues demolishing the cave. The griffin continues to destroy the cave, and within a few minutes, the secret realm is completely demolished, burying Medusa under the collapsing rocks. After completing this task, the griffin and Sal return to the flaming cliff. There, it declares Sal with its blessing, granting him a body that will never be injured, no matter how he's attacked. As the griffin's magic envelops him, Sal feels his body strengthen, and his minor injuries heal. He realizes that this blessing will be beneficial, as reducing his injuries means he won't need to constantly transfer them to Allan that often, which could potentially trigger the matriarch's suspicion. Sal must also hide his S-rank sword talent, for now, to avoid attracting unwanted trouble. After receiving the blessing, Sal then hands Medusa's blood to the griffin and instructs him to give it to the baby so that its wings will be healed. Right away, the griffin accepts the blood and allows its baby to drink it. The healing process quickly starts, and soon enough, the baby flies with joy. Witnessing its baby's renewed energy, the griffin is filled with overwhelming joy, grateful for Sal's help. However, despite healing the baby's wings, Sal still thinks that it will just be a stupid bird without a master. Confused, the griffin asks what he means by this. Sal then explains that it's nothing, and it's merely advice from a stranger. A manipulative stranger, that is. However, Sal hints that the griffin only became strong after he accepted a master. The truth then dawns on the griffin, realizing that Sal is right. If it didn't receive human brains from its master every day, then it wouldn't have awakened its intelligence and strength. However, the griffin's master had already died 100 years ago, so where can the griffin find another powerful and ruthless person like him? Lucky for you, we have just the guy for that. The griffin suddenly has a brilliant idea. Sal can become the baby's master. Suddenly, the griffin proposes to Sal that he accepts its baby as his pet monster, emphasizing its incredible intelligence and skills, surpassing anyone his age, even potentially exceeding Blood Cooper. Sal can only smile cunningly, seeing the griffin falling for his plan. The shift in demeanor. Sal faces the griffin and agrees to accept the baby as his pet monster. However, he sets a condition. In exchange, he demands all the information about Blood Cooper and the precious key that could unlock the place where the Cooper family worships the sword spirit Blood. Meanwhile, back at the manor, Hera is enraged because the doctors can't find the cause of Allan's frequent fainting. She refuses to believe that her son merely faints without reason. She then asks how long this will last, and her subordinate replies with reassurance, telling her that the young master has the protection of the Shadow Oath and has always woken up very quickly. He also adds that they have those little shadows that can help the young master take his injuries in his place and supply him with strength. Hera sighs, accepting that this might be true. However, she can't help but notice that this whole situation is too odd. Allan became like this since the day of the Shadow Oath ceremony, and she just knows that someone is behind all of it. Just then, the subordinate cautiously informs Hera of another urgent matter that requires her attention. He reveals that Sal has achieved first place in the competence test, just as they had anticipated. The subordinate hesitates to continue, but then discloses that Sal used the griffin to eliminate the walkers, and even tamed the griffin's offspring as his pet monster. The news shocks Hera, causing her to spill her tea in surprise. Hera swiftly demands to see Sal, but he has already entered the room uninvited. Dressed impeccably, Sal politely asks how he can be of assistance. Hera wastes no time and asks why Sal killed the walkers. Sal calmly responds that he did it for the family. He explains that a shadow training officer like Ino's being killed by a mere 3-year-old child reflects poorly on the Cooper family, making himself worthless trash. He then boldly questions if Hera agrees with his assessment, leaving her stunned. Man, this kid is giving Chucky vibes. The look of anger and hatred is plastered all over Hera's face, a sight that Saul is all too familiar with. However, even if Hera brings out all her trump cards, he's scared of nothing. Just then, Hera's reaction changes, and she becomes her sweet self again. She suddenly tells Dub, her subordinate, to assist Sal with recuperation in the Eden Spring, a little reward for winning the competence test. Sal bows his head in respect, thanking Hera for her kindness. However, he can't help but think that it's such a coincidence, as he initially planned to head to the Eden Spring. After Saul takes his leave, Hera tells Dub to accelerate the research for the deprivation magic. Before the sword spirit inheritance ceremony, Sal's talent must be stripped for Allan's use. If the secret that Allan has no talent for swordsmanship is exposed, his position as heir will be at risk. However, she decides to stay composed for now, letting things take their course. She allows Saul to leave, patiently awaiting the moment to see where Saul's arrogance will lead him. Later on, Sal arrives at the Eden Spring. While the other kids enjoy a warm bath, Sal remains observant and doesn't dive right in like the others. He recalled the griffin's wise words, which explained that before its master's death, he had used forbidden magic to seal his soul beneath the Eden Spring. This was done so he could pass on his swordsmanship skills, accumulated over a lifetime, to an heir with S-rank swordsmanship talent. thereby ensuring the Cooper family's status in the Empire would remain unshaken. The griffin also reminded him that he should swim along the undercurrent to reach the cave. Once he entered the Eden Spring, Sal had also received a key from the griffin, meant to guide him to the master. However, the griffin revealed that there was something strange about Eden Spring. Having been separated from its master for so long, the griffin could barely recall the exact requirements. Nonetheless, it knew that the master used blood magic, making the task challenging. Thinking about it, Sal realizes that it really won't be easy, getting the swordsmanship inheritance before Allan. While Sal is deep in thought, the kids in the spring recognize him as the winner of the competence training. They are also aware that Sal has tamed the griffin's offspring. While most of the kids are in awe of Sal's achievements, two bullies arrive on the scene. Renault Ors, the son of the Cooper family's stable keeper, and Lucian Sias, Renault's little sidekick. Lucian sneers, saying there is nothing impressive about the son of a prostitute. Just then, Renault sarcastically congratulates Sal, remarking that he hadn't expected a twig to reach the summit and win the test. As Sal looks at these idiots, he recalls that these guys were his subordinates in his past life. However, they were pawns placed by Allan, and they fabricated baseless accusations of him, collaborating with the enemy nation. Because Allan supported them, they got used to getting their way. Triggered by Sal's silence, Renault raises his fist and attempts to punch him, eager to see if his body is truly invincible. However, Sal catches his fist with one hand, greatly shocking him. With a cold voice, Sal simply says he will show him just how invincible his body is. He then twists Renault's arm, causing Lucian to jump in to rescue. Lucian pulls out a dagger, calling Sal a dog trash who's looking for death. Geez, these kids are wild. He then stabs Sal, but he quickly freezes when he realizes that he stabbed Renault instead. Sal, holding Renault up by his hair, sarcastically apologizes for accidentally using Lucian as a meat shield. He then kicks Renault towards Lucian, sending both of them into the spring. Sal reassures them that the spring can heal their injuries, so they should find that helpful. After all, he plans to use them as pawns in the future. As Renault sinks below the water, dark magic begins to wrap around his body, its evil aura unmistakable to Sal's senses. It doesn't make sense that this evil forbidden magic, which is close to blood magic, can manifest in a spring renowned for healing the injured and the sick. Realization strikes him. This must be the odd thing that the griffin mentioned. However, diving straight to the bottom of the spring is out of the question. He now needs to find a way to reach the depths without touching the water. Suddenly, Sal hears the voice of a young girl, and it seems familiar. Behind him is a girl being dragged by one of the manor's staff, punishing her for not serving tea properly. For this mishap, he's going to punish her. The girl, on the other hand, tries to break free from the staff's clutches, pleading that she didn't mean to do it on purpose. Witnessing this scene, Sal realizes that she's Andrea, someone he knew from his past life. Just then, the staff raises his fist in the air, ready to punch Andrea for talking back. However, his whole body suddenly gets cut in half, almost proportionally. The culprit is none other than Sal, wielding Perseus' sword. The other kids are horrified by the scene, so they quickly run away to report what happened. Andrea is shocked by the incident, so Sal asks if she's okay. As Andrea gazes at Sal, she questions herself if he's a prince. However, Sal interprets her silence as being scared, and he begins to worry. He quickly apologizes for his behavior, but Andrea insists that it's all right. She then thanks Saul, introduces herself, and asks for his name. "You kids are too young for this." Andrea suddenly grabs Sal's hand, concerned about how he hurt himself. As she starts healing him, Sal recalls that she was his best friend in his previous life, and she possesses a magic talent that surpasses anyone her age. Back then, they fought together for some time. She also confessed that she had feelings for him, but it didn't result in anything fruitful. Now, he can't help but think that 5-year-old Andrea is so cute. Okay, weird. A grown man in a child's body, remember? Andrea then thanks Saul with her big googly eyes. But Sal shrugs it off and says that isn't a problem. He also reasons that this is what a gentleman and a cold-blooded killer should do. He then tells Andrea to call him Saul. Just then, Sal asks Andrea if she knows a way to drain the spring or get into the bottom of the spring without touching a drop of water. Despite being starstruck by a 5-year-old, Sal focuses on the task at hand. If he's going to ask Andrea for help, then he's sure to get it. Andrea then asks if Sal also noticed what she's seeing. With Sal being confused, Andrea explains that although there is a strange magic in the spring that can heal injuries, anyone who uses it can never accept another form of healing magic and can only rely on this spring to recover their injuries. Sal realizes that this is another way for the Cooper family to control the shadows by forcing them to beg the family for help when they are suffering through pain. Andrea then tells Sal that she will offer a way for him to enter the spring without touching the water, a kind gesture for Sal's rescue earlier. She then summons her magic, coating herself and Saul with golden cloaks that look like ducks. She claims that it's called duck magic, as it enables people to become like ducks that can dive into the water without wetting the insides of their feathers. However, Sal knows that this is actually called insulation magic, but he just shrugs it off. The things you do for love. Suddenly, a bunch of guards enter the vicinity, and they're searching for Sal. Sal quickly grabs Andrea's hand and jumps straight into the water. While submerged, Sal spots the undercurrent of the spring, indicating it's where they should enter. However, Andrea signals that they can't go there, and they must leave. Sal, on the other hand, couldn't understand what she's saying, so they end up being sucked into the current. Shortly after, Sal gains consciousness, and he realizes that he's in a cave. He then looks around and grabs the key. Andrea asks what it is, and he explains that it's the gem key that can unlock the place where they worship the sword spirit. However, they can't spot a door anywhere, so Sal wonders how they can even use the key. Andrea suddenly suggests that they summon the door, which seems like an odd idea at first, but then she explains that although she doesn't know what a sword spirit is, she can surely give it a try. With this, Sal hands her the key, and she begins her ritual. She tells the key to listen to her call, find its master, and open the door to its place. However, as Andrea is concentrating on her magic, a bunch of meat-eating plants suddenly attempt to attack them. Sal grabs her, and they both fall to the ground. Sal is shocked to see a giant portal inside one of the plants' mouths, which might lead him to his destination. He then tries waking up Andrea, but she seems to have lost consciousness from their fall. Because of this, Sal carries her to a corner and decides to let her rest for now. He then uses the invisibility magic, something he learned from Andrea in his previous life. He hopes that this will protect her from being discovered while he's away. After all, he's sure there will be an ugly battle in his attempt to gain the inheritance of the sword spirit. Without wasting a second, Sal enters the portal and finds himself facing a grim scene. A flesh-eating monster with 6 eyes and razor-sharp teeth stares at him with a menacing smile, excited that a guest has arrived. Jesus, this gives me the creeps. Saul realizes that Eden Spring only seems like a medicinal hot spring on the surface, but in reality, it's actually a sensual place where the Cooper family keeps their concubines. While looking at the horrific monster before him, Sal is shocked as the truth sinks into his head. All those women became nourishment for this demon. Suddenly, the demon appears right in front of Sal, and he isn't even able to react right away because of how fast it moves. The demon sniffs him and says he smells the scent of an S-rank talent. Sal quickly sprints away, amazed by the demon's speed. Just then, the demon guesses that he's Allan Cooper, the kid who was said to be born with an S-rank talent. However, the demon notices that he doesn't look pampered at all, leading it to guess that he's just a bastard child who came to steal the inheritance. Just then, the demon sprints towards Sal, ready to unleash blood magic. However, Sal counters the attack with his sword, while the demon says it will only give the inheritance to Sal if he passes the test. Unfazed, Sal only tells the demon not to worry because he specifically came for the kill. The demon suddenly raises its hand for another attack, saying that he expects nothing less from Blood Cooper's descendant. The demon lands another attack, but Sal continuously dodges and retaliates. However, despite Sal's skill, he inevitably earns an injury from one of the demon's attacks. The demon then hovers about Sal, saying that he's still a weak little brat. Just then, Sal's injury begins to heal, shocking the demon. It realizes that Sal received the griffin's blessing. He can't even believe that the stupid bird acknowledged him, but the truth can't be denied. The demon then ponders on the thought, realizing that it's been a while since he last saw that bird brain. Meanwhile, Sal tries his best to regain his strength, thinking that blood sacrificed a great amount of his power to seal his soul. If he wants to get the inheritance, he must not give up despite his limited abilities. With this, Sal gets up on his feet, ready to win. He suddenly unleashes a new kind of magic, which suddenly strikes fear in the demon. The demon screams in horror as it realizes that its magic restrictive formation which quickly pierces its limbs into a huge cross. Without remorse, Sal says that the demon has been dead for over 100 years, and it didn't even know that the Empire has already researched and developed techniques to deal with blood magic. With everything laid out for him, Sal only has to take the demon's heart and forcefully receive the inheritance. As Sal charges towards the demon, it screams in terror. However, he gets shocked when the demon finds itself free from the cross, sarcastically saying that it's scared. Sal quickly backs away, while the demon laughs in fascination, saying that this situation is interesting since it hasn't played with the little mouse for quite a while. Just then, the demon gets serious and declares that it's done playing games. Using its blood magic, the demon summons some blood spirits from the ground, sending them to attack Saul. Sal readily takes them on, but he can't help but be impressed by the demon's ability to control blood spirits using its own blood. Suddenly, one of the blood spirits slashes Sal's back, causing him to scream in pain because the attacks are severely concentrated. Left with no other choice, Sal summons the Holy Sword Protection technique. Using the Sword of Perseus, he attempts to resist the demon's blood magic. However, the demon breaks it to him. Then it's useless. With a single touch of the demon's hand, the protective barrier that Sal created breaks in pieces. In a split second, the demon takes Sal by the neck, saying that the cat will finally eat the mouse because it's done playing. Meanwhile, Sal, with his blood and mana drained, can barely fight back anymore. Suddenly, the demons say that Sal's aura is familiar to the taste of a concubine that he ate some time ago, and it guesses that she's Sal's mother. Upon hearing this, a surge of energy courses throughout Sal, and he quickly regains his senses. Oh, the demon definitely F up. Sal recalls his memories of his mother back when he was a child. Back then, he wanted to give his mother some flowers, but she abruptly said that she was leaving him. As Sal grew up, he became a victim of bullying, and he was constantly called a bastard who was abandoned by his mother. All these thoughts come cascading into Sal's consciousness, and with the truth that he knows now, he finally affirms that his mother never left him. Without wasting a second, Sal pierces the sword into the demon's heart, enraged that it killed his mother. The demon is shocked when it discovers that it wasn't really injured, but was pierced by a blood feast attack. It can't begin to fathom that a brat like Sal knows of such magic. Sal quickly escapes the demon's grasp, while the demon wails in agony, saying that Sal is crazy for burning his blood just to retaliate. The demon suddenly realizes that it used up too much of its strength, releasing the blood spirits, so it quickly consumes some of the concubines to replenish what it lost. However, as the demon desperately gobbles up the remaining corpses, Sal walks up to him, asking if his mother was delicious. Sounds a bit weird, but okay. With a seemingly demonic smile, Sal raises his sword in the air, ready to end the demon. However, visions of his mother suddenly flash into his memory, almost distracting him. Nevertheless, Sal coldly pierces his sword into the demon's skull. That zombie got its much-needed lobotomy. The demon falls to the ground, barely moving. With its last remaining consciousness, it realizes that Sal is actually mad. Well, someone got the memo late. The demon musters the courage to eat more concubines, but Sal suddenly jumps on its back, smiling like white-haired Chucky. Afraid to die, the demon pleads for its life, claiming that it can possess Sal's sword and become its sword spirit. Despite this offer, Sal mercilessly kills the demon, saying that it's not even worthy. With this final attack, the demon explodes, bathing Sal with its blood. The swordsmanship inheritance will then be imprinted within Sal's body after absorption. As everything falls quiet, Sal lets go of the sword. He realizes that he has always been motherless since birth. Everything he saw was just pathetic delusions. This only makes him a pitiful monster. Just then, as Sal gazes into the pool of blood before him, he suddenly sees an image of his mother, saying that she's always been by his side. However, this little reunion comes to an end when Andrea suddenly comes running to him. She is worried upon seeing him covered in blood, urging her to heal him. When Andrea touches his face, he suddenly remembers that in his previous life, she met the same fate as the concubines. Sal suddenly embraces Andrea, vowing not to let that happen again in this life. The sword spirit's disappearance caused a commotion within the Cooper family. Because of this, the guards who were in charge of protecting the Eden Spring were all sentenced to death because of their negligence. Meanwhile, the servants of the manor stopped bullying Andrea after witnessing Sal's ruthlessness. Of course, Saul was accused of being the culprit of the sword spirit's disappearance. However, without evidence, the matriarch can only pull her trump cards, desperate to persecute Saul. She tried confinement, withdrawing blood, poison, and many more, but Sal survived all of them unscathed. 4 years later, in the Cooper family training ground, Allan demonstrates his swordsmanship skills to the crowd. Most of the servants who were pitted against him trembled in fear as Allan pointed his sword at them, proud of his win. Duke Hugh from the Isaac family comments that he heard rumors about the Cooper family's young master. He heard that he was born with S-grade swordsmanship talent, and he's beyond thrilled to witness it with his own eyes. Meanwhile, Duke Leon Cooper, the family's patriarch, is flattered to hear this compliment. Suddenly, someone from the crowd catches the Duke's attention, causing them to peer into the situation. Sal has entered the training grounds, seemingly confident in his nonchalant demeanor. Just then, he casts a shadow blade attack, followed by a sword wind attack, sending his enemies flying. He was impressed to see multiple attacks coming from someone so young. Ordinary people his age would still be in the Iron Sword Apprentice level, but Saul is clearly in the Silver Sword Guardian level. Meanwhile, Allan is enraged that Saul took his momentum. You know better than to trigger a mama's boy. Furious, Allan challenges Sal to a duel. Sal is already laughing in his head, knowing that this boy is talentless. Based on his previous life, Allan's swordsmanship skills were all stripped from him, so this should be an easy round. Sal accepts, thinking that he can use this as a chance to see his skills. Meanwhile, Allan has a different idea in mind as he sees this opportunity as the perfect chance to kill Sal and just pretend that it was all an accident. The duel begins, and the crowd immediately cheers for Allan. As Allan lands an attack, Sal counters it using only one hand. With a yawn, Sal then tells Allan to use more force because it seems like his mother is not feeding him enough. Yikes, that's gotta burn. Saul suddenly flicks his sword, forcing Allan away. Infuriated, Allan charges with spite. He's in disbelief because his mother told him that with his current strength, no one can match him. As Allan continues to attack Saul and barely makes any impact at that, Saul can't help but think that this spoiled brat is so weak. Even the magic power imbued into the sword is thin. Sal can see that it's artificially enhanced too. This guy doesn't even have a drop of swordsmanship talent in him at all. Having enough of this noob, Sal wields his sword and says he'll show Allan what a real strike looks like. Just then, Sal attacks with a shadow blade third form, landing it directly on Allan's eye. As the young master falls to the floor, he screams in agony. Witnessing this, Duke Hugh laughs his head off, telling Duke Leon that he seems to have judged Allan wrongly. Allan's ability is nothing much, leading him to think that those servants he defeated were just acting. Leon gets offended by this, so Hugh explains that he was only looking out for his younger sister, who is engaged to Allan. Hugh adds that he doesn't want his sister to marry a useless man. Hearing this, Leon reminds Hugh that if the royal family hadn't granted this marriage, his sister wouldn't even have the chance to be married. Threatened, Hugh tells him to repeat what he said. However, he abruptly leaves, stating that he won't bother Leon any longer. Hugh also reminds Leon about their family's joint operations happening in 10 days. Once Leon is alone, he glances at Allan and considers him worthless. He suddenly asks a servant who the little shadow it is, and she replies that he's Saul, one of his children from his mistresses. This dude don't even know his own kid. However, they weren't able to record which mistress it was. Upon hearing that Sal is his son, Leon becomes proud of himself and says that everything makes sense. Leon then tells his servant to bring Sal to his study room. That night, Leon finally meets Sal. While looking at his bastard son, he doesn't sense any talent, leading him to think that Sal is intentionally hiding his true ability to steal the position of heir in the future. However, he's convinced that he's just a little brat who's easy to read. Just then, Leon tells Sal that in 10 days, he will lead Shadow Squad 10 toward the Lost Crystal City. They will be accompanied by the Isaac family, and together, they will retrieve the dragon egg. He then hands a sword to Sal, claiming that it will activate the teleportation to Crystal City. However, Sal knows that one must anger the demonic dragon to retrieve the dragon egg, which means that Leon doesn't have good intentions in sending him there. But Saul won't miss the chance to earn a dragon egg, so he accepts the sword. However, he does have one request. Finally, the day has come for Sal. The Isaac soldiers and Shadow Squad tend to head to the Lost Crystal City. He also takes Andrea and the little griffin with him. As Andrea rides on the griffin's back, she asks if the family head has been informed of her absence, and Sal reassures her that it's all right. He then gazes at Renault and Lucian, threatening them not to tattle, while someone's getting princess treatment. Not long after, the group finds themselves in front of Crystal City, but it's far from its name. Allan starts to wonder that things are getting sketchy, because the Cooper family's elite team doesn't even have basic knowledge about Crystal City. Just then, Gloria Isik, Allan's fiancée, suddenly comments that the mission is a joke. She then walks towards Sal, extending her hand while introducing herself. However, Sal doesn't pay attention to her and only tells Andrea to stay with Mayo, the little griffin. Sal then walks into the city while the offended Gloria tails behind him. Sal suddenly tells her that if they don't activate the portal together before the sun sets, the trip will be wasted. It turns out that Sal deliberately limited his contact with Gloria because in his past life, this woman was extremely bothersome. As Sal prepares to open the portal, he only hopes that Mayo successfully finishes the mission given to him. Meanwhile, Gloria helps Sal in opening the teleportation portal. Some of the little shadows are impressed by the glowing altar, leading the soldiers from the Isaac family to call them ignorant bumpkins. As the portal appears, Sal gets mesmerized by what he sees, but he's skeptical that the eggs are really inside. Suddenly, a soldier from the Isaac family furiously declares that he will kill the Cooper family's soldiers and bring the dragon egg back for his house's honor. Eager to gain the Isaac family's favor, the soldier wields his sword and prepares to kill the shadows. However, a strange blue light suddenly appears out of nowhere, so Sal tries to warn the other to fall back. Just then, something emerges from the ground, and it's the light sentinel that protects Crystal City. Gloria quickly jumps into action, and she slashes the sentinels in half. She then screams at the rogue soldier, calling him selfish for acting on his own. Suddenly, two sentinels hover over Gloria, and she could have sworn to be dead if it weren't for Sal, who saved her. Sal quickly commands the shadows to get into formation. Together, the shadows pierce their swords into the ground, creating a strong surge of energy that restricts the sentinels. Just then, Sal wields his sword, curious if the power of the sentinel's light is stronger than their shadow. With a finishing move, Sal ends the sentinels, saving everyone in the area. The Isaac soldiers are dazed by the shadow's powers, as they are known to incorporate magic into swordsmanship. They then talk about Sal's incredible skill, despite being young. As Gloria listens to their remarks, her cheeks become flushed. Watch out, Andrea. Someone's taking your man. Meanwhile, a red crystal appears, and Sal takes it. He's quite proud of himself, because he absorbed the power of the crystals, and immediately rose from Silver Sword Guardian to Gold Sword Master. Now, he only has to insert the crystal into the keyhole. Suddenly, the ground starts to shake. The altar suddenly descends, so everyone quickly hops onto it, hoping that it's the secret passage to the dragon's den. True enough, as the ancient elevator reaches the bottom of the den, they find themselves surrounded by hundreds of eggs. Damn, those dragons got busy.